AJ, I have two questions, and the first one is like, what do you think you accomplished today? What were the greatest things you set out to do and that you accomplished?
Yeah, I think as a group, over the last few weeks, we talked about, having a few needs with the big league team. Probably adding a couple of bats, addressing left field and the bench. Looking at the catching spot and seeing if there's a possibility to change the mix a little bit there. And then potentially looking at the rotation, whether from the depth standpoint, obviously getting Michael King hopefully back soon and you coming back and pitching has been a big boost, but adding some depth to the rotation and then, potentially adding some impact as well to the mound, which, kind of goes back into that, you can never have enough arms and never enough impact arms. So that was kind of the wish list over the last few weeks. And I think we've taken a team that's I think, in position to play in the playoffs and a very good team and hopefully rounded it out and given Schulte and the coaching staff an opportunity to do their thing.
Hey, I know you have a lot of confidence in your group, in yourself, and the ability to constantly replenish the minor league system. Like, how do you explain or how do you kind of reconcile sending away a few of your top guys for the future for this opportunity right now?
I mean, again, it's always I mean, it's probably the toughest part of the job is having those conversations and making those calls. But again, we've talked about it. I think it's a testament to our scouting and player development group. We've had whether it was in different points in time over the last few years, we've been able to be in this position to make these types of decisions and calls, and it's just because we have good players that other teams want, and I think it's I think, Matt, I said it a few years ago when we made the Soto and Hader deal. I think at that point in time, we'd been on a run of 7 or 8 years where people were talking about us as being one of the better, best systems in the game. We made some trades at 21 for Joe and the 20 deadline, 21 with Joe Yu and Blake Snell. And then a couple years later, because of our scouting and player development group, we are in a position again to do Soto and Hader and, the last few trade deadlines. So, again, I think we've talked about it. We know that the system is strong and I can see it, you can feel it, but it's nice when you're having conversations with other teams that, there's a lot of interest in our players. And I think having made those deals that we made, we look at a system that has a lot of strength to it right now. And we've already kind of started looking at, hey, here's some of our top prospects, and we've got a lot of guys that are going to play with Petco here in the future, along with helping out the big team.
And next we'll go to AJ Cassavell, MLB.com.
AJ, what is the view for Mason Miller's fit and why it was so important to even add to this bullpen that's already obviously very good? And then, like, to expand on that question, what is his fit in the long term? Do you view him as a reliever or could he be a starter down the road going forward?
I think adding to his strength, and I talked to Schulte about it a lot. We talk about it as a group. I think it's also about getting impact performers. Mason's an A-lane, type performer, one of the best in the world at what he does. And like we've seen so far, through the first 100 games, we have an opportunity to shorten the game. You want to take that, and I think also it gives Mike an opportunity to mix and match with the pen. An opportunity certain nights to be able to go one set of relievers and give guys an opportunity to get a little bit of a rest and a blow, and be fresh of hopefully what's a long run here for the rest of the regular season and into the postseason. So. And as far as Mason, he's a talented pitcher, and we saw him as an amateur. I think our area scout Jay Koenig was all over him as an amateur. He came into our pre-draft workout. I still remember talking to him on the first base line at our pre-draft workout and how impressed I was by him. Kind of messed that up because I think we asked him to take a cut in the draft, and from his slot value, he didn't want to do it, so he probably shouldn't have been a Padre a few years ago. But he's a super talented pitcher, and I think we've talked about. I think the focus now is go do his job that he's been so good at doing in the bullpen, and help us win a championship. And then we'll talk in the future. It's nice to have 4+ years with Mason Miller, and he's a guy that brings a lot to the table, and we'll continue to see what's the best thing for him to impact the Padres as we go.
Obviously, Leo is a guy you have really liked and a lot of people in your organization have really liked, and there were reports that he was untouchable in past trade deadlines in the offseason. What What allowed you to go out and trade him this year? What changed, if anything, and kind of how tough was that to make that move?
Yeah, it's I mean it's the most difficult part of the job. I mean, Chris Kemp, in the international group, an unbelievable job at identifying Leo. We have history with Leo since he's 13, 14 years old in terms of when we started following scouting him. And he's going to be a very good major league player. I think we've talked about this in the past that there are going to be guys that we sign and scout and develop, and we want them to do it at Petco at a championship level. But there's also the opportunity to take a group that's very talented, and again, you're not doing it for a rental player, you're doing it for players in Sears and Miller that have 4+ years of control in terms of the ability to impact years of pennant races. I think we understood. He's asked about in every deal. He's a really good player. He's a tremendous prospect, and I think we weren't going to do it unless we got the right fit, the right pieces. And I think when we started looking at overall, I was trying to hit 3 or 4 different needs. We tried to figure out different ways to do that, and ultimately we ended up with the combination that we did today.
All right, next we'll go to Derek Togerson, NBC7.
Hey, AJ, what was it that put Fermin on your radar, and how are you able to pry him out of Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean he's been somebody the last couple of years. I know, conversations with our scouting group, Pete DeYoung, our pro director, Shilty from across the field. You see a guy that's playing, along with Salvador Perez and is so highly spoken about in the game of baseball. I think a little bit under the radar, because they have Salvi there and maybe a little bit late, a late bloomer getting to the big leagues at a later age. But when you watch the Royals the last few years, you're like, hey, who's that catcher that's back there that's impacting the game both sides? It's a guy that, from a defensive standpoint, does a good job on the receiving side, blocking. He's got a good arm and can neutralize the running game, and it's tough out. So, two-way player, fits what we're doing. And from a makeup standpoint, it's kind of those A+ reports. When you start hearing about, how guys fit into a clubhouse and what other people think about him, the impact he has on his teammates, and how well liked he is. I can't tell you how many reports over the last, over the last few weeks when we started digging more into Freddy, how many reports kept coming back about, winning player, glue guy, kind of core guy on the Royals. He was tough for them to give up, I know. But I think for that reason we wanted him with us. So it ended up working out.
And then you brought in a lot of big league ready, big league capable guys. How do you foresee fitting all these guys on the 40-man and also on the active roster when the game time comes tomorrow night?
I think the pieces, again, like I think that's kind of nice how the pieces came together. I think we talked about, obviously with Ramon Laureano, he can play all 3 outfield spots, both corners. It's a right-handed bat, which helps our attack against left-hand pitching. You've got Ryan O'Hearn that can do the same, play both corners in the outfield and the first base, and with Sheets and Gavin's ability to do the similar thing, play the corners, first base, DH. I think we talked about like every night being able to either rest a starter, maybe rest 2 starters, and then having weapons to come off the bench. And if you're going to win a championship, you can't have really any weak links, and that was kind of the focus for us over the last few weeks. And as we got into the deadline room over the last couple of days, was the pieces fit. I think the personalities in terms of like some guys that have been through the hunt before, and I think kind of not just good, like glowing makeup reports on the guys that we brought in, and them being really committed to go win a championship. I'm looking forward to see it. A lot of conversation with Shilty about the dynamic with the clubhouse and how this group will fit in. He has such a good feel for that room, and I think that the pieces and how they'll fit together, and those are the reason why they need to do those.
Thanks, AJ. Congrats.
Marty Caswell, Sporting Tribune.
Hi, AJ. There was a lot of dialogue around Dylan Cease. What led you to keeping him ultimately?
Yeah, I mean Dylan's a tremendous pitcher. I think you're going to win. You're trying to win a World Series. You need guys that can pitch. In the front of a rotation, and Dylan is. When you get in Cy Young votes, we see the stuff. I think I had a conversation with him yesterday, just letting him know that like from our standpoint, it's this time of year where you hear a lot of speculation, and you're always, it's trade deadline. You're always going to pick up your phone, and when people are calling, that's a good sign that you're somebody that people have interest in. But for us, our best team in terms of it starts with that starting pitching. Getting Darvish back, hopefully getting King back, Pavetta and Cease. That's a great place to start. We think we acquired some other pitchers that are going to add to that mix. And for Dylan, when we made the trade last spring training, it was designed towards multiple postseason runs. Our best team has Dylan Cease on it, and I think he understands that.
And with the players that you have in your prime right now, a guy like Manny Machado, and you coupled with the guys who could leave in free agency, Arise, Cease, and King, does it feel like it's World Series or bust with the group that you do have in this season, this run?
I mean, I think the expectation of this group is always to go win a ring, go win a championship. I think that's the goal that we set out at the start of spring training. So, it's like last year. We got to the playoffs. We felt like we were a dangerous team. We were one of the teams that had a chance to win. Ultimately, we fell a couple stages short of what we tried to do. So, this year, I think from our standpoint, it's going to be kind of learn from last year and go take another run at it. But we never look at it from our standpoint here, ownership, myself, Eric. It's not about one season. It's always about, we've looked up now 2020, and we made some deals at the deadline that year. 21, I think, in the off season. Each year so far, and that was the marching orders from Peter and from Ron, was, kind of be the team of the decade and have an opportunity every year for the city of San Diego to look out and, have a team that can win a championship. You don't do that by putting everything all in or feeling like, hey, it's a bust if you don't win the championship that year. But that's our goal, and continue to extend this run. We feel good about where we're at with that.
Jeff Sanders, Union Tribune.
Hey, AJ, what can you tell us about Jorge Quintana, the kid that you got in the Brewers deal?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that, Pete DeYoung, who oversees our pro group, he was super excited, in terms of getting a younger player, had gotten some attention as an amateur player. Again, somebody that's shown some ability to control the strike zone, has the ability to put bat on ball. I think it's like when you look at the frame, I think feel like there's some room to grow. And obviously we moved some players that in our system from a prospect standpoint that that ultimately left some more opportunity. And in that deal, you move a Lockridge that's been a nice piece for us here since we got him last year. You get back Nestor Cortez, but getting back Quintana was a real part of that deal. Getting a young player that we feel like has opportunity to learn and develop in the system. My guess is a chance to go out into full season ball here shortly, and we'll start to learn a lot more about him as we go. But he was. It's not just, I know sometimes you hear about the throw in or anything like that. That deal was, it was good to get Nestor, as a starter that's had a lot of success. And then also get Quintana as part of it was, that was all part of that deal for sure.
And then Ethan Salas has been hurt. What is he doing lately? Is he behind schedule? And did teams ask about him?
Yeah, Ethan, he's recovering from that stress reaction. I think from our doctors and medical staff, they talk about being a 3-month injury. So I think August 1st is the target date. He's been asymptomatic and feeling good. So I know he's very anxious to get back on the field. We've had other players within the past. Tatis, when he was a younger player. It's kind of a usage injury for young guys at times in the sport, and it's not anything that has been recurring in the players that we've had, and we've seen it in the past. It's just more of a rest type deal. There's not much you can do other than taking the time to let your body recover. He's starting to gear up now. I think he's going to get in and play baseball in August and September. I think we'll look at the off season for him in terms of, is it fall league, is it winter ball? How do we catch up on those at bats? He's it's I think testament to him as a player that in a year where he has not played a lot of baseball, he was still mentioned in all kinds of scenarios. So I think everybody knows the talent that Ethan has, and I know he's super excited to come back and start playing.
You said August 1st was a target. Does that mean he's going to do stuff tomorrow, or did I misunderstand that?
I think to me, like it's kind of when he can get cleared to start, to start getting more active on the field. So up until then, it was just more in the rest recovery rehab portion. Now we'll start to revisit again with our medical staff and training staff. They'll take the lead with it. All right, what does that mean in terms of his progression back to play? And we'll have some updates over the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, Gonzalez, ESPN.
Hey AJ, when you were negotiating with the A's for Mason Miller, how real was the possibility of then trading Robert Suarez in your mind, and what got you to a point where you decided, you know what, we're going to keep them both?
Well, it wasn't, when we talked about Mason, it wasn't with the intention to then move, to then move a reliever, I think it was the intention to continue just to add to the bullpen. And, we see a scenario again, like when we looked at it, we think the scenario is a really good one in terms of having a lot of dominant, impactful relievers that can shorten up games. Obviously, after we made the acquisition, we started getting a lot of phone calls about what it means, and we've got a lot of relievers that teams had interest in. But honestly, like the conversations amongst our staff when we talked about Mason, we knew it created opportunity, and we would listen on that. But ultimately, it was geared towards having those guys on the roster together, and and how that shaped our staff and our ability to win games, and we were excited by that.
And AJ, there are a lot of people in the industry who are in your position who are kind of, I guess, a little bit scared away of trading a big time prospect and looking bad years later when that prospect develops into somebody who's really, really good and being second guessed in that way. I'm wondering just like what got you to a point where it seems as if you're almost like numb to that right now.
No, I mean you're always looking to make good moves and moves that make sense. I do know, I think I've said it a couple of times. I know in talking early on in the stage where in this job, I talking to Billy Bean, with the A's, and he would say, "Look, I've traded, MVP caliber players, Cy Young caliber players, all stars, and and over 25 years later, I'm in this chair and won a lot of games. So focus more from his standpoint about what you're getting back and how it fits your current team." And everyone, again, like everybody's got different markets, different philosophies, different points in time from a competition side standpoint. We've been through the stages from 2016 to 2020 where we were building, and it was all about talent acquisition and how you can acquire players. So we're kind of on the other side of that, and that was building some really talented farm systems, and a lot of those guys now are in the big leagues and playing well. But again, like for us, we've talked more about making fair deals and deals that work for both sides. And you look at the Yankee deal last year. They got Juan Soto, and it's kind of fun to debate. Was that a good deal for the Yankees? Bad deal for the Yankees? Good deal for the Pods? Bad deal for the Pods? I think that example of like having a deal where the Yankees went and got a piece that they needed to go potentially win the World Series. We got other players that fit our roster and our team and have some carry forward value. That's the way the deals should be. Deals that help both teams win. That's the perspective we take. You obviously are always trying to make good trades, but I think we understand you got to give up good players to get good players. And at the end, if it puts your team in a good position for now and for the future, that's a positive outcome. And if we're doing our job, you're going to have players that are going to show up in the big leagues and are doing well, and I think teams understand that, yeah, we'll deal some players that'll do that, and I think that probably helps us make some other deals.
Thank you.
Back to AJ Cassaville.
AJ, you just had 22 guys move in trades in, I guess, the last like 12 hours. Can you give us a sense of what the last couple of weeks were like in terms of just how many possible trade scenarios you had, and just I guess all of the different factors at play and the way it all came together today?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with our front office, our baseball ops group. I mean, different legs of that. It's different now because I think AJ, like for the last few years, it's changed because you would have the draft, and then the draft was in the first week of June, so you'd have 7 or 8 weeks where you really could evaluate your system and kind of take your time getting into the trade deadline and kind of shift from draft to trade deadline mode. Now a lot of focus is on the draft until the draft is done, and then you've got more of a whirlwind with 2 weeks from draft until the deadline. But the prep period, with Pete DeYoung and his group, Adam the Scare from an R&D standpoint, his group, Cody's up, Nick, the front office. That's, you're doing a lot of work in preparation in the months of June and leading up to July. So, it's a lot of targets and focus. You're trying to predict like what potentially could happen. You're going to be looking for major league pieces. You're going to be looking for prospect deals. But it just comes down to the fact that, we've got, it's a concerted effort. It's a lot of people on the same page. You're out there trying to be prepared. And then once you get to that draft for 2 weeks, it's kind of all systems go in terms of seeing, sending guys out to see your top targets and then jumping into the boardroom for the last, for the last 5 days or so, getting everybody off the road, and then come the good debates and conversations, and how many ideas. It's a lot. It's the whiteboard. It's fun. It's kind of what you would imagine, I think, about. But it's a super organized process, and I think when we get done with it, we feel like we're in position to make good moves and good decisions, and hopefully the decisions will work out.
Also, what is the state of your current catching situation? Obviously, you added a guy to a mix that already has two guys. Is it possible you carry three? What does the playing time split look like with Fermin and whoever else is still around? Do you know the specifics of that yet?
Yeah, I think that's some conversations for myself, Shilty, the coaching staff, Ruben, both on the pitching staff, on the position player side. So we've talked about it going into this, but I think now we're gonna huddle up here in the next few hours and just kind of make sure we have everything in line with who's coming, when they're coming, what does it look like, how does that affect the roster, and we'll have some more information tomorrow on that.
Back to Kevin AC.
EJ, what's the plan with Nestor Cortez? What's his health?
Yeah, I mean he's been in that rehab, pitching rehab outings, and over the last few weeks we had a scout, Kimball Crosby, that saw him in his last outing, I believe July 24th. So I think he's ready to go. Just talked to him on the phone. Again, I'll talk to Schulte and Ruben here in a little bit about exactly when and what it looks like, but we acquired him with the idea that he's going to come to the big leagues and pitch and start for us, and now just a matter of letting Schulte and Doom kind of put the schedule together, and some moving parts, in terms of some guys coming back from from the IL, a couple trades, Michael King, where that all factors in. But we acquired Nestor with the idea of getting him a crack at starting.
Owen Hernandez, LA Times.
Hey AJ, the fact that you guys aren't just currently in one of the wild card spots, but the fact that you're also just a few games back in the division, the fact that you guys can theoretically compete for one of the two first round buys in the National League, how much did that influence you to be as aggressive as you were, or do you think you guys would have done this regardless of kind of where you were, say if you had a wild card spot, but you're kind of way back in the division?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to be cognizant of where you're at, in terms of the standings and from a competitive standpoint. I think you're always constantly trying to evaluate, hey, is it worth it? And are these moves that are going to make a difference? So that's all part of the decisions. In terms of like, making addressing, like I said, a couple of the position player and bench spots, and the rotation depth and the bullpen. No, I think we kind of set that out, whether we were 2 games, 1 game, game up, 5 games. We knew we were going to have to shore that up if we wanted to be a team that could play deep into October. I think from that standpoint, we went in knowing, okay, we think we have a team that can compete and play deep. And ultimately, we have these needs, and let's go fill them. With us, it doesn't really change if you win, 2 or 3 at the end, right before the deadline, you lose 2 or 3. I think you get a pretty good sense. I mean, the fans know. I think you get a pretty good sense of where you're at over the course of 100 games, and I think we went into the last week having some goals. This is what we want to do. We don't really let a couple games affect you from that standpoint. I think we knew, about a week ago, this is how we want to handle the deadline.
Thank you.
Jake Garagani, CBS8.
AJ, I'm curious how you feel personally at the end of a week like this and the buildup you talk about, and the deadline comes and it goes. And is it a relief? Is it a stress situation to see how they play the rest of the year? Like, what is your personal feelings at the end of the deadline?
I feel better than I look right now looking at the Zoom camera. So, uh, yeah, I think, it's again, like every year's a little bit different. I think, for our team, I think our team's put us in a position to get excited. I think, the way, again, it's not a perfect, not a direct path and a perfect, path to get to where we're at. We had a great start and we kind of battled through, some of those injuries in May and June. And I think battled through, kind of some mediocre results. But I think the good part there is like if you can, you kind of battle through that and you look up and you look up and we're a pretty good team. I think we started to see that here over the last, 4 or 5 games with the Cardinals and Mets series. So I think for us the feeling's excitement. It's kind of looking forward. We feel like we made our club better. I think we're looking forward to seeing how we do here in these last 2 months of the year.
Forgive me if this is too personal of a question, and you don't have to answer if it is, but if you could sit down and talk to Peter after a day like today, what do you think he would say?
He'd be super excited and pumped. I think positive as always, I think and again for Peter he would be he'd always be asking a lot of questions. That was always like at the deadline, he would sit in the back of the room at times and he loved interacting with our whole staff and kind of seeing the process. I think for John got a chance to do that in the last few days as well. So, but Peter's always he loved that the process. He'd always tell people, go in the room, see the debates. He loved hearing the talk, and then super supportive of whether we got the guys we ultimately aimed out to get or not. Today we lined up on some targets. I think he's super proud, super excited.
Appreciate you answering that. Last quick one I got for you is why do you think you guys operate so differently than it seems like so many other MLB teams do when it comes to the trade deadline?
I don't. I mean, everybody I think has their own thoughts about what they're trying to accomplish. So we kind of focus on what we're trying to do, and the goals that we set out. Every year is a little bit different. This year obviously a lot of activity, and last year we were able to line up on some deals. I think part of it, like I mentioned earlier, is because we have good players in system. We have good prospects, and that's again, I know it sounds like a little bit like a broken record at times from this standpoint, but the scouting and development group, Chris Kemp and his team they do a great job, and I think that enables us to at least have the conversation. Some years you line up, some years you don't, but I also think we understand that we talked about it from day one. It's with the idea of playing on the big stage, and I think if you're able to scout and develop well, you have an opportunity every year to be in this position.
Appreciate the time. Hope you get some sleep here soon.
Thanks, Jake.
All right, last one in English. We'll go to Jeff Sanders.
Hey, Jude, haven't had a chance to wrap our heads around the full accounting of what happened today. So I'll just ask you, did you add payroll today? And did ownership give you the okay to do that? And what was it like working with John Seiler for this first deadline?
I think we're always cognizant of payroll and budget and what it looks like. And I think for us, in terms of a lot of the moves, they were moves that we acquired players and by design, players that, in terms of the salary scale and structure, they're players that, that we have years, that we have multiple years with. And because of that, they're players that, at this point in time, kind of starting their journey through that arbitration, period. And from that standpoint, I think it's going to end up probably being a pretty neutral process. And, we're going to look at players that are going to be with us over the course of, 3, 4, 5 years. So when you give up prospects that, and young players that have a lot of value and a lot of value to us, not crazy about doing it for the 1 year rental, and I think with a lot of these deals, we did it for players that we're going to have multiple years, multiple pennant races. I think it fit for our budget. It fit for what we were trying to do in terms of looking at future years. You always have this year's plan and budget and program, and over the course of the next 3 years, I think it fit on both fronts, and why we end up making the moves we did.
And working with Seidler, his first deadline, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, John's super supportive. Asking, again, asking a lot of questions, and I think just enjoying the process. I think from the draft a few weeks ago, kind of similar, where John, Eric Grubner, Mark Loretta, and you have guys popping in and out all the time. Jake Peavy, when he was here for the draft, and then adding to the process, kind of sharing their experiences, kind of picking their brain. So it's just, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. You're in the room for a long time, both in the draft and the deadline. But you feel that support, and it's just kind of, again, it's a good group that comes together, and ultimately hopefully make some good calls.
The last one for me is last year when you acquired Scott and Adam, Suarez remained the closer. Will he remain the closer again this time, or is that up for debate?
I think again, I think that'll be a conversation with Schulte and Ruben and then the players, I'm sure. So I think when we made the moves here today, I think we've got a group that's all in and they want to win. I checked with Schulte beforehand on that front, and I'll let those guys work it out. I don't get super involved in a lot of times, but I think the biggest thing in the comfort from this chair is we've got players that want to win a championship, and whether that was talking to Gavin Sheets or some of the new players that are coming in, they understand that it's going to take 26 guys, it's going to take 40 guys, and I'll let the group kind of work it out. We'll talk about it more, and I'm sure naturally we'll figure out a mix that fits and makes sense for us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Lastly, if AJ will humor us and take a couple questions in Spanish, we'll go to Tony Alvarez.
Thanks, Craig. AJ, te saludamos con gusto. Preguntarte primero sobre el picheo. Sabemos que tienes que deshacerte de gente importante para obtener también gente importante. Lo platicabas ahorita con Colick y Berger saliendo, pero antes, ¿qué es lo que le da al equipo profundidad en la rotación, sobre todo, y en el bullpen, con la llegada de tanto Mason Miller, de JP Sears y, por supuesto, también de Néstor Cortés?
Y no, siempre, si tú vas a ganar un campeonato y todo empezar con los pitching, con los lanzadores. So, cuando estamos hablando sobre diferentes cambios y siempre estamos pensando que tenemos un grupo que está completo en la rotación y también en el bullpen. So, con Nestor Cortés, con JP Sears, dos zurdos que tienen mucho resultado y tienen mucha historia en la Grande Liga y pichando mucho entrada, y también con Mason Miller, y él va a ayudar un parte del equipo que está muy, muy fuerte con nosotros, la relevista. So, siempre fue un gran meta de nosotros, es siempre para fortalecer y los lanzadores y el pitching también.
AJ, y sobre la llegada de Ramón Laureano y Ryan O'Hearn, ¿cómo vislumbras tanto la posición en el outfield, DH, tal vez mezclándole con Gavin Sheets? ¿Cómo crees que eso surge en los próximos días?
Sí, y con Ramón y con Ryan y los dos da Shilty muchas opciones, porque tiene mucha versatilidad, y con Ramón él tiene experiencia jugando los center field y left field y right field, y también con Ryan él puede jugar las esquinas y también primera base, y también con Sheets y nosotros ver Sheets jugando, y Sheets está jugando a designado y primera base y también left field. So, y estamos buscando por un equipo que está completo, que tiene muchas opciones, y por Mike para usar todos los peloteros, y también para usar, para dar a los peloteros un día de descanso y continúa con un equipo que está fuerte.
Gracias, AJ, por tu tiempo. Thanks, Craig.
Gracias, Tony.
All right. Thank you very much, AJ, for your time. We appreciate it on a super busy day for you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you at Petco Park tomorrow.